Hey everyone, welcome back to the Esports Heaven podcast. Today I am not back with my usual counterparts. I don't have my co-host. I actually have a special guest today, and it's Artosis. So hey man, how you doing? How's the casting life mid-COVID?
Yeah, well, for me, it's not as bad as it is for most casters, I think. I'm pretty lucky to be living out in Korea, but everything's good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. You've actually, speaking of things being a lot more active over there, you've actually tried your hand for the past several seasons at qualifying for ASL, and since they're online now, you most recently actually streamed the experience. So how did that go? Would you do that again in person? Were the guys in the chat behaving? How did that go?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the guys in the chat were saying during it. I got a lot of good feedback from it. People definitely enjoyed watching it. Um, I mean, I guess because I was doing it on my computer, I saw no reason not to stream it. If I'm live at a venue, I'm less likely to stream it, I would say, because the setup time is pretty heavy to set up a stream at a PC bong, and
Oh.
it's kind of annoying when you're trying to get in and you have like 1 hour basically maximum before your first match. So probably wouldn't do that live, but yeah, I just made the best of the online situation, I guess.
All right, cool. All right, so actually, since we just talked about you qualifying or attempting to qualify for ASL, I immediately want to segue into something that's always interested me, and that's a lot of times in the past how you seem to kind of had this internal mental war between wanting to become a professional player and a professional broadcaster
Mm.
or esports talent or whatever. You've previously qualified for GSL and have played in it, and for people that aren't aware, you essentially went through hell just to get to Korea and get the job you had and so on when StarCraft 2 is about to come out. So something I wanted to know is if you could go back and change your priorities, would you actually consider strictly focusing on trying to become a professional gamer when you landed in Korea?
Well, honestly, that was my hidden plan when I came to Korea. The reason why I came to Korea to cast was to try to make my way onto a pro team, and things just didn't work out. So, I mean, yeah, I think I would always go in with that being the goal. I like to compete. I like to play StarCraft. I like to, try to be as good as I can be. And yeah, I mean, when I moved to Korea, it was like, okay, I found a way to get there because it was impossible to get there via skill. It just wasn't good enough. No non-Koreans were honestly good enough to get over here based on skill. But when I got here, yeah, it did not work out. I didn't have a PC or anything. It was kind of a it was a difficult situation because of that.
Sure. Do you think your odds might have been a little bit better had you been given a PC at the place you were staying, or do you think it still would have been like ridiculously hard? Because I actually am not aware how close you felt you were to the top competition at the time that StarCraft 2 came out, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
So yeah, so the timeline actually goes like I moved to Korea in 2008, which was a couple years before. So I was coming over with the idea about StarCraft 1. I wasn't even thinking about StarCraft 2. I believe it had been announced maybe earlier that year or maybe late 2007, I believe is when they started announcing StarCraft 2, but that was not really. It's like, yeah, when it comes out I'll play it. It's
Okay.
that's one thing, but yeah, I mean, I was in the best StarCraft 1 shape of my life when I went to Korea. And I was supposed to have, I lived with the Eastro team, and part of the agreement was that I would have a PC to play on. Because I actually had tournaments coming up like WCG USA and stuff that I had already qualified for. And so part of my agreement to come over was there would be a PC for me to practice on in the pro gamer room. And that just didn't happen. So I basically went to Korea and didn't play StarCraft for 2 months because
Lovely.
I was busy working and I had no money and I had no PC. So yeah, I mean, I'm completely fine with how my life has worked out. I have no regrets or anything. It would have been interesting to see if I could have improved a lot with a PC down in that practice room. I think I could have, but it never even came close to working out. So who knows?
That sounds very like commonplace as far as early age esports agreements go.
Yeah, I don't know how many years it was before I signed an actual contract in this industry, so you're definitely right about that.
You mentioned when you went over there, you were in your peak Brood War form, and I know this is asked on your stream a lot, but I kind of want to ask here because I think there's kind of a misconception in terms of Brood War's golden era in terms of skill cap versus now. So how would you say, like, you would, well, one, how would you fare if you faced yourself now back then, and how do you feel about just the general, I guess, par for competitive play in terms of qualifying for ASL or even ranked ladder?
Okay, so yeah, I'm definitely better than I was back in 2008 now. I've been playing since Remastered came out. So I think that came out in 2017, if I'm not mistaken,
I think
2017 or
it's late
2018.
2016, right?
Oh, was it?
Maybe I'm
Yeah,
crazy.
or I don't know. Anyways, it's been a few years. But yeah, I've been playing extremely regularly and practicing, so I'm definitely better now. And this is something that people get confused about. A lot of people just think that all the players were better back in the day, and maybe for some players that's true, but really the whole level of StarCraft has gone up over the past 10 years. Even while StarCraft 2 was out, like StarCraft 1 took a hit for a while when all the pro teams kind of disappeared from it and all the leagues kind of dried up. But it's been back in pretty full swing for a while, and I think that at this point the metagame, the strategies are moving forward faster than ever in StarCraft One. I think, and that's mostly due to basically all the good players are streaming. Like if you're a pro in StarCraft One right now, it's via streaming. Only Flash makes real money on tournaments. So that like helps in a way that I think people have missed. It's like, yeah, we don't have the pro teams anymore, which is like really dedicated practice. So like if those had existed the whole time, people would probably be even better right now, especially mechanically than they are. But I think that, if you look at it, if there's like 8 or 9 pro teams at a given time back in the old day in StarCraft 1, you would have maybe 1 to 2 genius players per team. Now, and those players will basically not interact with each other. There's no free flow of ideas because teams need to win. They need to bring home prize money and championships and win in Pro League and all that. But right now, you have basically all the genius players playing and talking to each other and streaming all their games. So the metagame has moved forward a lot. And for that reason, I tell people, like, people are better right now than they used to be. We're at a very high level in Brood War right now. Everyone is really, really good.
Yeah, one of the biggest examples I think of meta development that I've always been geeked about is just the development since relaunch of Remastered to TVZ. I mean, the fact that people are kind of like swapping back and forth between mech and like going back into bio, I feel like these were kind of ridiculous concepts back in the day, and it's just, I don't know, it's great to see things that are popping up that the game's been out for so long, and it's like, wow, this is just now being discovered. And you'd think with how much people practiced back in the day as opposed to now, I'd argue people actually have a more healthy practice attitude now, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Do you think these kind of things would have been like discovered? Do you think like maps or like coaching staff or anything has been a kind of a factor in it not developing back then versus now for those big meta shifts?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, I think that the fact that everyone's streaming and all the great players that used to be split up amongst teams can kind of have a more free flow of ideas is definitely helping. Uh, I mean, the thing is with coaches in esports, it's like a funny thing. I don't think it's analogous to real sports at this point. It's just like it's still so new. So like back in the day with the Kespa teams, there were coaches that were really great, and then there were coaches that were terrible. And it was like, oh yeah, this coach doesn't know he thinks he knows about the game, but he really doesn't, and he's actually probably making his players worse. Stuff like that has occurred in the past. So, I mean, why are we getting these meta shifts now? I mean, we were definitely getting meta shifts back in the day, but I really think it just kind of comes down to everyone's streaming, and that's helping to kind of push it forward. People are experimenting a bit more. It's if you're going to do exciting strategies, you're probably going to get more viewers as well on your stream. So maybe that's helping. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, just because I think for people that haven't been around for 10 to 20 years, getting a hold of pro replays back in the day used to be ridiculously hard. Like, you were super
Impossible,
lucky if you got one,
dude.
or it leaked and you weren't supposed to have one, basically.
Yeah, like if me or one of my friends got a hold of an actual pro replay, it would be like a siren goes up, over on MSN Messenger or IRC or whatever we were using, where it's like, I have a real replay from Nada. And everyone would crowd into the replay and watch it and be like, oh my God. And you'd watch it like 20 times because you just could not get those. It was so rare to get a pro replay.
So a lot of the pro scene, even though the game itself has developed a lot of it still has like well, not like it's not oversaturated with them, but there's a lot of older legends that are still at least competitive or can get into ASL. You have Bisu, Flash; those are the big examples, And so what I wanted to really touch upon. You being someone that also still competitively plays yourself at a pretty high level, I feel like there's a pretty big misconception, or at least a not clear understanding about staying in competitive games as you get older. Like a lot of players in the newer generations of esports, and that could be League of Legends, Overwatch, COD, whatever flavor of the month shooter is the thing right now. A lot of those guys go into really early retirements and burn out really, really fast. But then if you look at something like Brood War, which is very mechanically intense, and if that's too much of, or that's too small of a sample size, you have like Daigo Umahara in all the fighting games. He's still dominant. I mean, he's approaching his 40s soon. I mean, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so people always, whenever I talk about this, I'm like, this is something Tasteless and I like to talk about on GSL sometimes. And then we always get the guy that like tweets us the ESPN article where they're like, you slow down, your reaction speed slow down, as you get older. Here's the science behind it. It's like, okay, well, your reactions are slowing just slightly, but most certainly all of your experience and your gained intelligence and things are things that can absolutely make up for it. And I think Daigo is the ultimate example of that. As you mentioned, he's the oldest active pro gamer in the world, and he plays a reaction-based genre. He plays fighting games where it's like, okay, well, his reaction speed is still good enough, and he's smart enough, and he has a lot of experience. So it's doable. As for what happens with all these burnouts and things, like, I mean, Brood War had a gigantic burnout rate when all the pro teams, the Kespa teams were around, right? Like, you'd be playing 12 hours a day or more, and that is going to burn you out. In fact, you kind of alluded to it earlier on. It's like some of this training was to people's detriment. People were not necessarily training in the optimal ways to get better. But I mean, it's an easy cookie cutter way to just print out pro gamers is you get all the players that want to do it, and you see who will do it and who will improve. And you're going to get some real beasts out of that. But of course, that can cause a lot of burnout. Now you look at it now where there's no pro teams, it's a bit more relaxed and people are doing things like streaming. It's like, well, I mean, I guess you can play for 12 hours a day if that's what you're into. But everything's more relaxed and you can kind of go at your own pace, which maybe this brings us down slightly from where we could have been theoretically with pro teams still existing. But it's definitely healthier for the players, and it's kind of nice to see the older players actually still be able to do something, because it's not just the burnout. It's also, as you get older, you want to try different things. You want to do different things. Right? Like, for instance, if you look at me, I moved to Korea when I was 25. I still had a lot of ambition for StarCraft, and I was forced into a weird position where I couldn't play. So what I did at that point is what most people end up retiring to do. You start doing some other things, figure out like, oh, what else can I do as a career? I went into commentary a lot. You start doing things like actually dating and getting into a serious relationship, things like that people, that are playing 12 hours a day, eventually they want to do that. And they kind of lose a lot of that motivation, lose a lot of like, want to sit down and do that. And then they just say, I don't know, my hands are getting, slow. And it's like, well, I mean, you want to do other things. That's okay. That's cool. That's a normal human thing. A lot of these people have been playing since they were 12 years old. So they have actually missed this huge period of, self-realization, I guess, like figuring out who they are and other than the video game. Uh, but you know, I think a lot of people are getting to go through that partially without the pro teams around, where it's a little bit more relaxed and you can do things like go out and have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you can do things like spend time with your friends and take days off when you need them. I know for me personally, like, you know, I came to Korea really wanting to be a pro gamer in the Korean scene when I was 25. That absolutely didn't work out, and I kind of built a casting career. Found my girlfriend and got, you know, I dated people and then found my, you know, soon to be wife. I've been with her now for like a really long time, like 10 years or something. I have 4 kids, and now that I kind of like I've done all those other things. You know, I built a career and I make solid income and I have children and a wife. I'm like, you know what? I still have that drive for StarCraft. So, you know, I think that that's like I have a very different path personally, but it kind of shows that like I did those in between things that make a lot of people quit. And maybe as people get more time to do those things when it's a less stringent practice environment, then we'll see more and more players play as they get older.
Yeah, that actually makes me extra curious because I think the way, like you brought up how people can kind of balance life a little more even while being, you know, really good at StarCraft, and you can see this with, you know, people that are even in the ASL. Some of them have kids, and you know, like outside of StarCraft. But what's always been weird to me, and I feel like contradicts like most of sports science, is the domination of Korea in Brood War early on with those ridiculous practice levels. And I don't mean that just because, you know, it's a lot of practice. So, like, theoretically, they should be the best because no one else takes it seriously, because that doesn't seem to be the case. I know a lot of Western pros were practicing 8 to 10 hours a day, just they weren't practicing 16 to 18 hours a day. So, and for context, for people that weren't around at the time, yes, it's normal for you know, Korea to be ahead when they really care about a game, but to the degree of which they are ahead in Brood War versus other titles relative to the rest of the world, it's absolutely ridiculous. So how do you feel this chasm developed? Like, why was it so much better over there than it was in any of the Western world, really?
Yeah, yeah. And just to kind of underline the way that you're asking this point for anyone that might be listening to this, you know, when I hear other games when people in League of Legends a few years ago were like, "Damn, the Koreans are just so good." Like, you guys don't even know what good Koreans are, okay? Until you play Brood War, it's like the difference between Koreans and non-Koreans in Brood War is infinite. It doesn't even make sense. But yeah, so how did that develop? Well, I think it has a lot to do with a lot of different things. First off, is infrastructure. Is, you know, if they have all the pro teams out here, if it's on TV, if you're getting huge money and stuff, of course you're going to have so many more people playing, so much more. There's also a work ethic that very few non-Koreans have, that the Korean pros actually do have. Whereas, you know, if we're seeing players, or we did see players back in the day getting sponsored by shoe companies and, you know, giant corporations, cell phone companies, all this, making huge amounts of money, being super famous, you know, those are big motivating factors. Whereas in the foreign scene, if we had one tournament for $50, every player would play because that would be the biggest thing. It's just like we had nothing. We had, if you were lucky enough to live in a country that was going to have a WCG spot for Brood War, that was your one thing all year long. And like, if anything else came up, you're like, this is a great year. And that's really kind of the way it was. It was like people were passionate, but there was no infrastructure. And when you blend that with how professional it became in Korea, something that really startled me, especially when I got over here, is just how much more everyone knows about the game. Because it's been on TV forever, and these commentators are fantastic. They do their homework. They're high-level players themselves a lot of the time. They've talked with the pros. What they were saying, especially back then, was deeper understanding than the best foreign players had of the game already. Just the commentators talking about it to the fans, which is why you would get so many players that just know the game better and know what to do, because the foreign fans are like, well, you know, we don't speak Korean, and we're trying to learn, and it's tough. So yeah, there's a lot involved in it as to why they were so much better.
Do you think Korea was a lot faster at adapting StarCraft as a macro and mechanical focused game over a strategical game? Like, do you think that they
Oh yeah.
caught on that that was like more important than just strictly how strategical you were over the West?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think that that probably would have always come about pretty naturally when you're having kids play for so long, because eventually you're going to get that pattern recognition that, like, wait a minute, if we just figure out how to make more units, that's really good. And I mean, you could see even the shift within the pro scene, like especially when Nada came up, it was like, oh, okay, producing well is very important. I mean, still to this day, you can see it where like I mean, there's a lot of really good non-Korean players, but they just they can't macro to the level of even lower tier Koreans, not even close.
All right. So, anyway, segueing back to kind of like your career and the way you balance things, what are your current goals with streaming and gameplay? Because I think that you used to stream like 3 hours a night, right? And now you stream
Yeah.
like 5 or more hours a night. Is it
Mhm.
just because things were slowed down a little bit, and you might like put your focus more on other things that aren't directly playing Brood War now that ASL and GSL are back, or is this kind of
Mhm.
like a permanent trajectory shift for you?
I think it's a permanent trajectory shift. It doesn't really have as much to do with playing Brood War, to be honest. The increased streaming hours. It has more to do with I've been in this industry for a really, really long time, and I've commentated so much. But when you look at it, like I haven't really built anything that's mine. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with streaming and YouTube and things like that at this point. Um, you know, it, I've been very successful as a commentator, but I don't actually. That's like, okay, yeah, I did those gigs and I got paid for them, and that's it, right? I don't make any money from MLG at this point. Like, I have to get hired for things, basically, I guess is the good way to put it. And I don't, at this point, I'm kind of, I'm 37 years old. I have 4 kids. I'm kind of tired of that, of kind of waiting around for people to contact me, or even if I'm getting out there and contacting people ahead of time, having people decide whether or not they want to hire, having people decide, oh, are we going to run a StarCraft tournament? And then, oh, are we going to hire Artosis? That's, I don't, it's just, it doesn't seem like an intelligent way to continue my career forward. So I'm trying to put more of an emphasis on creating my own content so that it's a more stable base. Like, I still love to commentate, and I'm still going to do that a lot, but I don't want to have to rely on that. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I understand that you're trying to expand your repertoire, and like you kind of alluded to earlier, when you get older, you kind of want to do new things, and it kind of makes sense. You want to set up that legacy for yourself. One thing that I actually was always curious that you never partook in was coaching, because you seem like you're in the perfect position to do it. Because in terms of years of experience and seeing the best play front and center as a caster, and being able to kind of talk about the game and elaborate on intricacies really well and deliver it to an audience. Is it just because you have too much going on, or is there some other reason you just decide not to coach?
Yeah, I think it has to do with having a lot going on. And the thing is, coaching is actually something I look towards as something I would be very, very interested in the future. Like, if StarCraft 3 comes out or something, or if StarCraft 1 or 2 gets revived much bigger and has a scene that rivals the size of uh, Counter-Strike or League of Legends or something, right? Those scenes actually have coaches that do things. I would not mind being a coach that does things. Like, if I could work with like 1 to 2 players that are pros, and it's like big time, so that it would actually be worth my time to put all my time into analyzing and figuring things out and helping people to improve. That's something I would be very interested in. I'm really interested in things like sports psychology and practice routines and schedules and how to get better, and analyzing high level plays and finding counter strategies and stuff. That stuff is like, that's my jam. I love that so much. But just putting myself out for hire to help players to improve a little bit for hourly rates and stuff is not really like, I would feel like I'm doing them a disservice if I didn't work really hard to be amazing for them. And I don't want to charge people for that if I'm not going to do that. And I don't really have the time to, help someone get, in StarCraft 2 into Diamond or something. It's like, well, I mean, there's plenty of low level pros and stuff that are going to offer you coaching and be able to do this for you. You don't necessarily need me to do this. And I'm not I'm not that interested in trying to carve those chunks out of my day and not give my full self into it. I want to work really hard at anything I do, basically.
Sure. It's been pretty apparent that you're heavily into the sports psychology side of things. You brought it up a few times in previous Pylon Show episodes. There was a talk with Neuro you did that was really cool. I was really digging hearing you guys talk about like the effects of like nutrition and prep on how well you did in ladder. I thought that was really cool. So actually, I wanted to ask if you could dabble a little bit into your training methodology. And I know that that's kind of depending on if you can squeeze it in. Maybe there's not all the things you'd like to be able to do before you set up for a stream and practice. But, ideally, what are things you'd kind of like to do before you get into ladder, and how do you go about studying replays properly? These kind of things.
Okay, so, yeah, my days vary a lot because of my casting schedule plus whatever I'm doing with the kids on a given day. But in general, what I try to do, I generally play for 4 to 5 hours of Brood War per streaming day, and that's the vast majority of my practice right now. I've actually, when I do get games at night, they're really, I get a bit more done in them, like they're more valuable. But I actually find for myself, if I have a little bit of free time at night, it works a lot better for me to sometimes go over some of my replays. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just load up all of my losses from the day. People are always giving me trash on stream for not loading up the losing replays, but really I want to look at them later with a clear mind because a lot of times I'll be angry after a loss and you're not going to be able to really find what went wrong. But what I try to do is go in and find what the theme is of what went wrong here. Am I scouting wrong? Am I missing a macro cycle? What is this exactly? And then I look at all the losses for a given day or a given 2 days and try to see what the overall patterns are. And yeah, I do a lot of writing in my notebooks about ideas and thoughts and what type of mindset I'm trying to have, what I'm looking to do in a given day of playing. So yeah, if I have a free hour at night or a free 2 hours at night, that's generally what I'll do. I'll glance at the replays and then I'll just kind of basically what I do is I go out in the living room, I lay on the floor and I think, and it's very, just thinking about it is very helpful for me. If I can actually have, an hour to just be in my own thoughts and really try to go through it. So that's kind of what I do after the stream. Before the stream is a little bit hectic. My kids generally get me up about 3.5 hours before the stream goes live. And I just kind of clean up the house a bit and feed them and talk with them some. And, after that, if I have time, well, I always do do some stretching before I play because I don't want to have any wrist issues or anything like that. But yeah, other than that, in the morning, I don't get a whole lot done. I try to keep my eating very normal, about 30 minutes before stream, I eat oatmeal. I got that one from Nero. And it just kind of keeps me on an even keel, I guess, not switching that around a whole lot. I can kind of tell how I'm feeling if I'm eating the same thing every day. Go over my notes from the night before and try to get myself into a good mindset.
That is a really neat schedule, but dude, I have to ask, have you ever considered swapping those? Because I can't imagine how frustrating it's got to be to start your day, woken up early, and then you have a day full of fucking Proxy 2 gates, and then, time to prepare for the rest of the day. That's got to suck, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I get pretty upset about some of the stupid cheeses that kill me and stuff on ladder. But normally when I get off the stream, I'm cooled down within about 10 minutes maximum. Because it's when I get off, my kids are there, and it's like, well, it's pretty hard to be angry when little kids are hugging you and be like, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And like, just climbing all over you. It's like, oh, okay. And it's like the spacing between the two, I think, is really good and really important because my mind gets clear and I'm not really thinking about StarCraft for very long after the stream. And then later on, when everyone's in bed, basically, and it's quiet again, then I'm like, okay, now I can actually revisit this and I'm completely unemotional about it.
All right, cool. So yeah, actually, you were talking about how you kind of try to time your eating and stuff before stream. So I have kind of a curveball question because
Hmm.
prior to most, like I want to say like the last month or two, correct me if I'm wrong, but you used to be a vegetarian for a really long time. You were never really vehemently anti-meat or anything like that. I know it was like a dietary preference, but the reason I ask is I wanted to know if that somehow affected your energy levels and performance, because I know that it's like really inconvenient to be vegetarian in Korea, and I know it was kind of a pain for you and the family. So has that affected like your performance or anything? Like, are you more tired on cast? Like, how's that worked out?
It hasn't affected anything too much. Like, I still honestly prefer a lot of vegetarian foods, and I'm sure people are going to be like, everyone asks me all the time, like, why did you start eating meat? So I just want to put that here because I'm sure people will listen to this and be like, why? It's for my children. It's impossible to raise children correctly for eating when daddy has something else. So it's like, and anyone who has kids will realize this because kids get really finicky and want certain things. So like, like, my son just wants to eat toast all the time. That's his favorite food. And he wants toast. And when we're like, no, tonight for dinner is chicken and broccoli. And like if that's his, but then I have something else, that makes that whole situation really difficult. And when you add in how busy we are having 4 children here and trying to take care of them, to add another meal plan into that for me and my wife it's all kind of unreasonable. So that's why I switched. But yeah, back to your actual question here. I have noticed, I guess, with meat products that there's definitely like a scale. Like, chicken basically makes me feel like all the foods I ate before, like vegetarian type foods, where it's like, oh yeah, okay, I feel good after eating this. And on the other end would be like cow meat, where I'm like, I don't feel as good after eating this generally. But I think a lot of that has to do with the quality of it. With the vegetarian food, I don't think that there's a big range in quality. Whereas
Okay.
I tried like one day that when we were casting, Nick and I were casting shortly after I had started eating meat again, and like, it was either McDonald's or Burger King or something was delivered to the studio for everyone. It was like one of those special days where GSL's like, hey, everyone gets food. And so I tried a burger from one of these places, and I immediately was like, I need to lay down. I feel terrible. So I guess that's one thing I've noticed, is that the quality of the actual food is probably more important than anything else. And I've definitely noticed that with me, where it's like, okay, if this is high quality, like, I'm going to feel a lot better than if it's McDonald's garbage, which, I mean, as a vegetarian, I didn't eat McDonald's for like 23 years. It's just like, there's nothing there for me to eat. So I didn't realize.
Sure, sure. All right. I've still not properly figured out how to phrase this, but I wanted to get back to the game a little bit and gameplay,
Mhm.
and I wanted to tackle the dialogue surrounding something that's really misconstrued in competitive gaming, and that's the concept of matchup difficulty versus matchup odds. And
Mm.
this is something you hear about in every game, like fighting games, StarCraft. You even hear it in MOBAs with like lane matchups and stuff like that. And I think people don't quite grasp the difference between how difficult it is to defeat your opponents relative to their effort that they would have to do to get the same outcome versus how hard the matchup actually would be statistically to win. And the reason I bring this up is because obviously, it's no secret that you have a strong distaste for the Protoss race in Brood War.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to ask, and not as just like a softball pitch, because I genuinely want to know, especially with how things have shifted lately with map pools in terms of unbuildable terrain and things like that. Do you genuinely feel that there is some imbalance in the matchup, like TVP and maybe a couple others, or is it just that it's just so much harder to win?
Yeah, well, I guess what I get frustrated with a lot is the Terran side of Terran versus Protoss is a lot harder. You have to do a lot more. You have to be a lot quicker. You're a lot more like constrained on what you can do and what you can get away with, and it's your mistakes are less forgiving. So
Do you think that's in large part because of how the games and maps have shifted? Because I feel like if Lost Temple, for example, was still around, that wouldn't be the case.
yeah, definitely the maps have shifted into that type of area. The thing is, it would probably be imbalanced in the other way if we had all maps where it's really super strong terrain for Terran, because Terran obviously can do a lot of things on terrain that can screw things up, like build buildings out in the middle of the map that are really tanky and stuff. So yeah, that stuff definitely did get changed. It started around the Nada era, where they started being like, oh, okay, you can't have all this stuff that is good for Terran, because we have, it looks unwinnable for the other races sometimes in that case. But yeah, no, it's not actually imbalanced. It's just, I mean, everyone can get frustrated about various things, and truth be told, like, Protoss is completely beatable. It's just you really have to play a clean, beautiful game to do it. And the thing is, like, people always point out, like, oh, well, at the pro level, like this and that and the other thing, who's won championships, all that. It's like, yeah. The thing is, balance is different at different levels. And that's a fact. It's something that we talk about a lot. It's like you can't patch StarCraft 2 for bronze. You can't do it. It's like there's so many things that you can improve that will get you out of there. So improve those, and the balance patches have to be for the top end. Obviously, in Brood War, we don't have balance patches, but you don't need them because you can always just improve out of your situation. But yeah, it's definitely, there are things, especially, my level is like high A, low S type of player. And even at my level, it's like, if I make one bad decision against Protoss, I'm going to die. Whereas they can make a bad decision and lose a whole bunch. And it's like, well, you can't really punish Artosis. Sorry, the punishment is they can't kill you for the next 5 minutes. It's like, okay, well, now I have to use that. And that gets frustrating because, you just have to do a bit more as Terran, but that's just the way it is. And honestly, I wouldn't change anything. It's not imbalanced. It's a bit easier from the Protoss side, and that can be very frustrating.
That was going to actually be my follow-up, so I'm glad you said that, because I was wondering if you would change it, because I feel like it's almost a happy accident, because the person the person with the kind of personality where they want to feel that tremendous reward after putting in all that effort, even if it feels like an uphill battle, if it's fair, but they still have to put a lot of work in, it feels better after you win. It's just, it's a shame that us poor Terran folks are subject to disadvantage from turn rate and all that other stuff. But anyway, that's a little side rant from me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, and honestly, like, no matter how it is, there's always each side of each matchup, someone has to work harder in certain ways, and that's just the way it is, and it will always be that way. It doesn't matter what the patch is, and we know that StarCraft is balanced because you can just get better. That's it. StarCraft 1 is the most infinite skill ceiling amongst all games. So it's like you always have a way out. Just practice more.
So one thing I'm actually curious about, kind of to contrast my experience to your own, and I guess to a lot of people's interpretation of community at large, is how do you feel that StarCraft etiquette has changed online? Because I think a lot of people feel that it's a lot more toxic than it was, but I think it's just because I was raised in that Clan X17 culture where everybody always trash talked, but I feel like there was still some manner involved. Like, I feel like people said the most horrible things, but they always GG'd at the end, Mm-hmm. It was just a very, very unique situation. I don't know if you had any kind of different trajectory in your experience, but yeah.
No, totally.
It just feels, it feels like it's still toxic now, but like a little less personal, and I kind of miss that. I kind of miss that it was like a little more personal before, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, you're definitely right about that. Like even with the toxicity of somewhere like X17, there was a certain level of etiquette that you actually had to maintain. And I mean, I've been around since then, and I've seen people burn bridges by not GGing and stuff like that. It's like, and you almost had to judge like how you had to judge your position where it's like, oh, I really don't want to GG, but do I have to if I want another game with this guy? I think that this all comes down to automated matchmaking. The fact that we have a ladder where you just press a button, you get the game no matter what. You can act however you want because no one can stop themselves from queuing into you. Before, we never ever had that. So you would literally need your opponent to agree to play you, which forced the game to have a certain level of manners back in the old days. So I think it's as simple as that. That is why it's definitely more rude nowadays. There's like back in the old days, if someone offensive GG'd me, I would regame them one time to beat them, and that would be it, and I'd never play them again. It would be something like that. Whereas right now, it's like half my games I get offensive GG'd because they just hit the ladder button and they know they can just be an ass.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought up the regame thing, because one of the questions I wanted to ask was how you felt, I guess logistically speaking, and also just personally as a player, both for StarCraft 2 and Brood War actually. What do you feel about a ladder that tried to incorporate best of 2 or best of 3 rather than best of 1? And I ask that because I know that time constraints are an issue, but I feel like if you exclude Terran versus Terran, the average like League of Legends or Dota game probably lasts the same amount of time as a set would be in StarCraft 1 or 2 for best of 2 or 3. And I also think it would reduce the advantage of like barcode accounts, because I know one of the big issues is that when you fight a barcode account and you're high MMR, they recognize your name and can adjust your playstyle accordingly in that best of 1, whereas you cannot do the same to them. So do you think something like this would work, or is it just not, I guess, casual friendly enough? Or maybe it could be like a checkbox. I don't know if that would divide the community, but yeah, I kind of to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like I actually, a lot of people talk about doing something like that, and it definitely would do things like combat barcodes. I think it would actually normalize the MMR into areas where people are more where they're supposed to be, because seriously, there are people that just cheese every game, and it's like, well, in a best of 3 you're not going to have as high a win rate. That's because your opponent now knows from game 1 that this is the type of player you are. But I don't think it's doable to add something like that. I think, and this is something I heard a lot of times from the StarCraft 2 guys at Blizzard, where it's like people would ask, why do you have regular ladder hitting unranked ladder? It's like, well, you don't want to fracture any part of the player base. That's really important, right? We don't actually have millions of players within StarCraft 1 or 2, like some of these other games might have, right? You need all the players kind of playing together. I think it's much more important to be able to hit the button and get a single game when you want to than any of these other things that we've been talking about, right? Like, even though that's going to like up the power of barcodes, it's going to up the power of doing random all-ins and stuff. Yeah, those things are going to occur, but it's better that it takes like 1 minute generally for someone to get a match, and that's it. It makes the game much more accessible. I think it makes it better to play, and yeah, that's it. Also, I think if you put in the best of things and it was like a checkbox type situation, it would probably create other problems like abuse, because like if people are not checking let's play a best of 3 or let's play a best of 5, you could just do that with someone and raise your MMR up really high over and over, right? So yeah, I think it's kind of a cool idea, but not something that could ever happen.
Okay, fair enough. All right, yeah, we've been kind of reminiscing a lot about StarCraft in its different eras and at different times, because it is a very old game, and I think that one of the arguments people use as to why tournament organizers aren't bringing in StarCraft Remastered tournaments is because of its age, but I feel like at least in the last few months that argument has gone completely out the window. I mean, TSM picked up a fucking chess player. And some people are saying that StarCraft was, just because it's a fun game, it's not fun to watch. I saw that on Twitter recently or something like that. But if chess is fun to watch, then just Brood War has to be more fun to watch, even if you've never seen the game, right? So I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, how would we get more eyes on Remastered? And I know it's kind of like not a very simple solution to come to, and it's not something you personally have time for. I know that. If you could like delegate a team or a person to be in charge, like, what kind of pitches would you do to maybe try to make remastered tournaments in the West more of a reality beyond, like, BSL and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I mean, I want for StarCraft 1 to grow. I think StarCraft 2 is in a pretty damn good place, and there's a ton of fans tuning into each and every big tournament. Whereas StarCraft 1, it's just I, I think that there's like a big lack of a lot of things. There's not that much commentary. There's like the only professional commentators for it are myself and Tasteless, and we get 2 ASLs a year. And so what does that come out to? That comes out to 32 days of broadcasted professional level matches, professionally done in English. There are other things popping up, and I mean they're finding a little niche with some of these smaller like YouTube commentaries and stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure how to do it beyond there, because a lot of people are just gravitate towards StarCraft 2. It's been 10 years straight of really solid esports on that, and people kind of know the game and like it. And yeah, I don't know. It's a really tough question.
For me, the analogy I like to draw to it is Melee, because obviously every new Smash iteration gets its own competitive scene, but Melee is still considered like the king of it, and that also doesn't have developer support. And while it's not huge by any means when you compare it to gigantic esports, it's still up there, and it's really shocking to me that StarCraft doesn't have a similar spotlight. And you could argue like, oh, it's just too hard. And while it is true, it is the hardest game to ever have been made. Melee is not too far behind. And then you have very popular games, albeit single player, and like the Soul series and stuff like that. I think the kind of difficulty scares people off theory is a little bit debunked. So it's very strange to me.
Yeah, honestly, we had an opportunity to get Brood War into a spot like Smash Melee. I think when Remastered came out, there was a bunch of events really close to each other. People remember there was like 4 big events with myself, Day9, Tasteless, and In Control as like the hosts and commentators and stuff. And for the money put in for those events, that was the highest esports viewership that Blizzard has ever done.
Wow.
It was insane, because those events were much cheaper than any WCS stop or anything like that. And they were getting insane views. We were like bringing in like 40K viewers, and that was just the beginning, right? And the thing is, I think that this is a big part of Smash Melee. They have some great some great personalities and stuff to go with it that really helped it to kind of take off again. And the thing is, we have that in Brood War. There's some great personalities, man. Like obviously the 4 of us were doing a good job there and kind of entertaining people and showing how beautiful the game was. And we really tried. We had meetings with each other. We talked with Blizzard. We tried so hard to keep it going, and there was just no interest. Like, we really wanted to do more of those events. Those were like the most fun ever, because the 4 of us had played since the beginning of the game and knew everything about it and loved it and wanted to share that we're all friends and making good jokes and having a good time, and people were enjoying it. But there was no support. No one was interested in pushing it forward. And I feel like if we had been able to put on just a few more of those, we could have maybe hit escape velocity where, sponsors start getting on board and it becomes something. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards, I guess.
Dark world we live in.
It is.
Oh, man.
It's very sad.
All right, well, I guess enough lamenting the potential loss of very popular Western Brood War. I guess I'll kind of segue into the more personal, familial aspect of this interview. So you have a wife and it's 4 kids, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a handful.
It is. It is.
So I'm actually kind of wondering how that dynamic was like early on. Were you able, like when you met your wife, were you able to just kind of immediately explain your kind of just your passion for games and how important to your life it was to you? Was that like a little awkward at first, or I kind of wonder how that developed.
Yeah, so my wife like really likes games. She liked playing WoW quite a bit in college and all that. So she was a bit of a gamer. In fact, she's probably more of a gamer than I am. I'm a StarCraft guy. Like I play StarCraft specifically, and I play some other games. It's like it's not that I hate games or anything. It's just I'm not someone that tries every new game that comes out or gets excited when they announce a new PlayStation. I just don't care. But so she was a bit of a gamer, and it's kind of like a funny story I tell sometimes where it's like when we got pretty serious, when we were getting serious, I let her know there was like this set of things that I let her know. I'm like, I'm gonna play a lot of StarCraft. Like these are things. Basically, I was like, these are things you have to accept about me if this relationship goes forward. I play a lot of, and this is not a lie. I actually said this and let her know because it's like, well, this is such a part of me that I may as well be upfront with it if a relationship is getting serious. And it's like I play a lot of StarCraft. I get really angry at StarCraft. You have to like Tasteless. And yeah, and there was a couple other things that were un-StarCraft related, but it was like, yeah, those are important. Those are really important, right? Like Nick is someone that I work with super closely, so he's important to my life and to my career. And then it's like StarCraft is just my thing, and you have to know that I'm going to play a lot, and I will get angry, and it's I'm not angry at you or anything, but I get frustrated, and I always have. So those were things that I warned her about, and she was cool with it. So here we are.
Yeah, I actually think that's like super healthy, despite kind of being almost stigmatized in a way. Like I feel like a lot of people kind of tiptoe around the fact that they're really passionate about something that's not necessarily mainstream, and then they're kind of always like walking on eggshells with their commitment towards things they love. And you guys have been going 10 years strong because you were upfront about all this at the very beginning, so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's important, and like I mean, I'm not going to change who I am. This is
Absolutely.
It's like, well, if this is what I am and who I am and what I do, that's just the way it is. I can't change that.
So are your kids gamers at all? Do they have like a favorite race? Do they enjoy watching StarCraft to any degree?
Yeah, they aren't super into watching StarCraft. Like normally when there's like a big tournament that's still on in the morning, I'll throw it on the TV while they're playing and stuff. But um, my kids are 8. I have 3-year-old twins and a 1-year-old. So obviously the 1-year-old has not played any video games yet. My 8-year-old is quite good at games, and she likes playing games. She doesn't play like all the time, but she's good at games, and she can like use I've taught her how to attack, move multiple control groups, and we're going through the Terran campaign very, very slowly. She's interested in Zerg. But I told her we need to finish the Terran campaign. I want her to get the full experience, and I feel like I have this very small window to make her a Terran player. But I think she'll probably end up dabbling with Zerg a bit more. The twin.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the twins are not ready for keyboard and mouse yet, but we play on the Nintendo system.
The Switch.
Yeah, the Switch. I was like, Wii? No, the Wii is the old one. Okay, yeah. We play on the Nintendo Switch a few games. Like the Paw Patrol game is a great game for kids. That really helped them to kind of learn how to use the controller because it's so straightforward. But since they kind of started to master Paw Patrol after playing for a couple hours, because it's mostly you just hold the stick and jump. Like you hold the stick in a direction and jump, and that's basically the game. They like some more complex games. Like they are both really into Zelda Breath of the Wild. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I have a character I did everything in the game with that has like fully maxed out armor and health and stuff. So I just put them on that, and they love to run around and explore the world. My son loves battling monsters, and my 3-year-old daughter will mostly explore, and then when she hits a monster, give it to my son, and he'll beat the monster, and then hand the controller back, and then she'll go climb a mountain or something. But yeah, they like video games. It's not like a necessarily an everyday thing, but we play a couple times a week, I guess.
So you said they appreciate complexity. Are you going to be disappointed if any of them end up being Protoss players? Is there a universe that exists where that's allowed?
Yeah, they can if they want to play StarCraft, they can play any race they want. I mean, I have
Just
I
not
have
random.
appreciation for
You can't go that far. No random.
well, I'm not going to allow them to waste their time. Okay,
There you go.
that's
All right, cool. We're approaching the end of the interview here. It's been about like an hour, but yeah, before we close out, I actually wanted to kind of. We talked a little bit in like bits and pieces about what you do throughout the day, but since it sounds like you have so much to squeeze into a day, and you're so diverse in what you do, I kind of would like a sort of walkthrough from like morning to sleep in the day of Artosis. Like, how do you end up splitting that time between training and work and family and broadcasting?
yeah. Well, I guess it matters on the day. So streaming days are Monday through Friday for me, and that's always the same time period, which is 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And then it's like, do I have a cast or not on a given day? Weekends are off except for casting. So basically, it's generally my 3-year-old daughter that wakes me up in the morning. She'll generally wake up around 6 a.m. And yell to me like "Dada, Dada," and I'm like, okay, here we go. So generally, I'll go out and she'll wake up her brother. 'Cause they sleep right next to each other, and yeah, they'll come out, and so I'll have them playing in the living room and just kind of clean up the house a little bit, start getting breakfast ready and all that. Maybe put on a cartoon, something like that, and then generally my 8-year-old will get up, and then eventually the 1-year-old will get up, uh, and yeah, just kind of feed everyone and make coffee and all that stuff. As we approach like 8:30, it's kind of like getting ready for school time. Well, I guess with coronavirus, it's sometimes there's school, sometimes it's canceled.
Sure.
That varies quite a bit right now in Korea. But yeah, you just basically take care of all that. By about 9 a.m., I'm basically transferring everything I'm doing with kids over to the wife because I have my stream to start up. So I'll eat breakfast, which is generally just oatmeal with some berries in it, each day at 9, and I'll get the stream ready. I have to pop it up and make sure the overlays are all in the right order and whatever, and make my title, all that stuff. So I start streaming at 9:30. Around noon, 12:30, I'll eat lunch on stream because it only takes me a few minutes. But I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm hungry, guys.
Sure.
And yeah, basically I play Brood War pretty much the whole time except for Pile and Show on Thursdays. Um, and yeah, at 2:30, pretty much 2:30 sharp, I get off. Just throw a raid on someone, thank everyone for watching. Um, and when I get off, I just kind of go out. And sometimes my daughter is still at school or Hagwon, which is like after school activities. Uh, and sometimes my kids are at their kindergarten thingy. It's like a daycare / kindergarten type thing they have out here called a lineage. And sometimes they're at home because of coronavirus, whatever it may be. But basically, I just go out and spend time with the family from 2:30 until the bedtime, which is we start getting everyone ready for bed. Probably about 6:30 well, not everyone, but the 3-year-old twins. We
Sure.
start getting ready, and brush teeth, read stories, stuff like that. And then they'll end up going to bed, and then I basically spend the next maybe hour and a half with my 8-year-old, helping her with some homework. And then she gets free time after doing a little bit of homework at night, reading books, whatever, just kind of keeping them as active as possible with the learning stuff. But then maybe we'll play together a video game or watch some funny YouTube videos or play with some of her toys or something. And yeah, at that point, probably around 8:30 or so is when I might get some free time. At that point, the 1-year-old will probably be asleep as well, and then my wife will either like watch a show or, like I mentioned earlier, I might go over my losing replays or just think about the game some or read a book, basically whatever I want at that time. And yeah, as far as bedtime, I try to basically head to bed about 10 p.m. I'll like brush my teeth, and go get ready for bed because they do get me up very early.
Mm.
Um, but obviously, this changes if there's ASL or GSL. Instead, we'll go back to when the stream ends. So if the stream ends at like it ends at 2:30 each day. And then generally what'll happen is I'll go out, spend like an hour playing with the kids, and then get ready for work. And I generally have to leave between 4 and 5 p.m. And at that point, like I'll get home 11 p.m. about just I guess on average. Obviously, it can go a lot later. A long day of GSL, I'll get home after midnight. A short day of ASL, I'll get home at 9 p.m. But yeah, that's basically what the days are. There's not much variation right now.
Yeah, sounds very strict to get everything neatly in place and working out. Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
It's good. It's good to be on a schedule with a family.
Yeah, for sure. All right. One last question before we close out. What kind of resources are there for anyone who wants to get into Brood Wars? I know that's usually very intimidating. One thing I always recommend is the CPL. I loved playing in the CPL because you have people mentor you, and it gets rid of the whole like, oh, I don't have any low level players to play with thing. Is there any other kind of like resources you'd consider really good for beginners? Like which should they start off with? Like which should they drill, and like maybe like websites they should visit?
So yeah, I'm not super good at this question. I've played forever, so I generally don't have great advice for people. So I try to direct them to things like that. Like CPL is great. There's another amateur StarCraft 1 kind of tournament slash group that I'm trying to remember what it is. I talk about it in the Pylon Show this week in StarCraft, and for some reason it's eluding my mind right now. But there's a couple groups that are like CPL. Also, there's some discords. I know there's something called the Foreign Brood War Discord that you can find a lot of people that love the game in there to talk to. You can definitely talk to people that are better than you. The thing is, a lot of the good players will take time to actually explain things to you. Like, people really love Brood War, and if you're really interested and you ask them, a lot of times they'll just kind of tell you what they think about something, which is going to help a lot. I know that I believe what is probably the best thing to start on would be Day 9's series from when Remastered came out, called like Let's Play StarCraft. Day 9 is really one of the best minds in StarCraft ever for the non-Koreans. So anything that he's made is fantastic, but that one in particular was to help onboard new players into StarCraft 1. So I think that's a really good resource, Day 9's Let's Play StarCraft.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's just about it, man. Thank you, Artosis, for joining me. I know it's like, again, I said this pre-call, but I know you have so much going on, so I super appreciate you taking the time out to do this. It's been great, and honestly, as a pseudo fanboy myself, it's been really cool because I've been following, competitive Brood Wars since before esport was a term in the West, and yeah, it's just really, really cool to kind of go through history and explain to people that you can keep playing games that are hard when you're not, or when you're above 25, believe it or not, you're not just completely debilitated.
Yeah, why would you waste your time with garbage games when you can play something really hard and try to improve yourself? It's way more fun, trust me.
Yeah, there we go. Any last things you want to say before we close this out?
No, just thanks for the interview. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and everyone, I guess, check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Artosis.
Awesome. Thank you, man. See you guys.
Thanks.